My name's Jordan Clay. I'm 35 years old, a senior developer based out of Seattle, and up until yesterday, I thought being the eldest son meant something. I reread her message 3 times. We've changed all the locks on the front door and the gate code. We no longer consider you part of this family. No punctuation. No warmth. No hesitation. It felt like a corporate termination email, efficient, cold, final. From the woman who once held my hand through pneumonia and promised I'd always have a place to come home to. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I didn't even blink. But inside, something folded in half and burned. I had just wired $8,000 last week to cover Nathan's final loan payment. My younger brother, the golden one, the one who always needed more time, more support, more room on why help was never asked for, just assumed I'd been carrying this family financially for nearly a decade. Quietly, without complaint. Apparently, silence is only golden until it's not convenient anymore. When I finally called, my stepfather picked up and said just 3 words. Let it go, Jordan. Then he hung up. Let it go? Funny that I didn't even raise my voice. That I just stood in my kitchen, barefoot, looking at a family photo still magnet clipped to my fridge. The one from Thanksgiving 2 years ago. My arm around my mom. Nathan leaning in like we were still a team. I guess I missed the part where I became the outsider. But here's the thing. I don't scream when I'm betrayed. I build. So, to whoever's listening, whether you've been ghosted by your own blood or had the door slammed on you after everything you gave, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Have you ever been erased by your own people? If this story hits home, drop a comment, smash the like button, and hit subscribe. You're not alone. Because the thing about exile is, it doesn't mean you're weak. It just means it's time to become dangerous quietly. To understand how it got to this point, you need to know how it all started before the silence. Before the locks were changed and the message arrived like a bullet, we had something that looked like a family. It had the shape, the language, the routines. It even had warmth sometimes. But it was the kind of warmth you get from a space heater, direct, deliberate, and gone the moment you move an inch out of place. I grew up in Spokane, Washington. Not the part with the fancy farmers markets and lakeside property, the other side, at a neighborhood of cracked sidewalks and garage sales that never really ended. My mom, Diane Clay, was a school vice principal. My real dad disappeared when I was 5. There's no poetry in that, no postcards. Just a long shadow across every holiday photo afterward. Ray stepped in when I was 7 tall, hands like sandpaper. The kind of man who believed chores built character and boys don't cry. Wasn't advice, it was law. He wasn't cruel. He didn't have to be. He ruled with tone, with silence, with the kind of disappointed glances that made you fold into yourself. So I did what smart kids in bad dynamics do. I became useful. I got straight A's, fixed anything with a power cord, learned to stay quiet in rooms that weren't safe for questions. I earned space at the table. Not by being loved, but by being low maintenance. Then came Nathan. My younger brother arrived like the second coming. Blonde curls, perfect dimples, the kind of baby strangers compliment in grocery lines. He was everything I wasn't: loud, soft, needy, adored, and the world bent for him. My mom had a new joy. Ray had someone to teach sports to. And me? I became the dependable one. The solid one. The background. But I didn't hate it. Not then. By the time I was 15, I had already rebuilt an old PC from a thrift store haul and sold my first coded add-on for a video game forum. I taught myself Java before I ever went to prom. And by 25, I was knee-deep in contracts for small business software. At 27, I launched GhostKey, a clean, scalable cybersecurity tool that quietly disrupted local IT markets. Money started coming in. Nothing viral, but enough to breathe easier. I moved to Seattle, set up shop, paid off my mom's car, paid Ray back for some imaginary debt he never let me forget, bought Nathan a laptop for school and offered him a part-time role in my new company while he was still studying for his MBA. He took the offer, took the salary, took the credit, and I kept giving. Because that's what good sons do. Or so I believed. I was still flying back for Thanksgiving. Still wiring money when the water heater broke. Still driving out to fix the Wi-Fi when their tech guy didn't show. I thought I was building something sacred, a bridge between the boy who grew up needing approval and the man finally earning it. But I was wrong. I wasn't earning trust. I was funding comfort. Every act of generosity I offered wasn't creating connection, it was buying silence. My place at the table. As long as I didn't challenge the dynamic, I was accepted. But the moment I asked questions, started pulling back, started noticing how I was the one always bending. That's when the bricks started moving. That's when the locks began to change, not physically yet, but emotionally, quietly, decisively. And by the time I heard them click shut, the damage was already done. The first betrayal didn't explode. IT whispered, subtle and easy to miss if you weren't looking. Jordan, co-founder of the tech startup GhostKey, discovered a suspicious transaction in their company's bookkeeping system. $5,137.42 paid to a vague consulting firm labeled only as Brand Integration Advisory. No project code, no invoice, no explanation. Jordan flagged the charge and messaged his business partner Nathan. He didn't respond not for a day, not for two. On the third day, Nathan strolled into the office late, coffee in hand, smug as ever. When questioned, he casually said he'd hired an external team to help with outreach since Jordan had been too swamped. Jordan let it slide, but deep down, something shifted. Nathan had bypassed him completely. No heads up. No transparency. And they had previously agreed to freeze unnecessary spending. Over the next few weeks, that one breach of trust snowballed into a pattern. Nathan began meeting clients, solo clients Jordan had brought in. He started issuing press releases without any review. He took more calls behind closed doors. Slowly, the team stopped looking to Jordan for direction. He chalked it up to paranoia until one night, staying late to patch servers, he overheard Nathan on a hushed call in a dark conference room. When confronted, Nathan lied, saying it was his girlfriend. But Nathan didn't have a girlfriend. Things came to a head at a tech leadership retreat in Arizona, funded by one of their angel investors. Nathan pushed for both of them to attend for optics. Jordan agreed. But once there, it became clear who was getting the spotlight. Nathan introduced himself as the visionary of Ghost Key, while Jordan was reduced to the tech guy. At every networking event, the narrative was the same. Nathan was the brand, the idea, the future. Jordan, just the back-end mind. On the final night of the retreat, they had dinner with Trevor Marks, a powerful venture capitalist they'd long admired. Halfway through, Jordan stepped away to take a call from one of their engineers. When he returned, he found Nathan discussing the company's future, including preparing for acquisition and needing full decision-making authority by the next quarter. Jordan froze. They'd never discussed selling the company. When he asked about it later, Nathan brushed it off. It was hypothetical, he said. You're too rigid, man, that I'm thinking big picture. But the look on Trevor's face, focused entirely on Nathan, said it wasn't hypothetical at all. Back at the office, things began to unravel quickly. Jordan was removed from the shared calendar. His access to internal systems, including the CRM, was revoked. Legal amendments appeared in their partner agreement granting majority leadership oversight and expedited restructuring rights. When he brought it up during a staff meeting, Nathan laughed it off in front of everyone. Classic CTO behavior, he joked, and the room chuckled. Jordan sat in silence, alone in the company he helped build. The final blow came on a rainy Tuesday. Jordan arrived at the office at 7:45 a.m., like he always did, only to find his building access denied. Security told him his clearance had been removed overnight. He stood in the drizzle, watching through the lobby glass as Nathan arrived 15 minutes later, laughing with the new operations lead. He didn't look Jordan's way. Not once. At home, Jordan logged into their cloud systems only to discover that his admin privileges had been revoked. All the documents, dashboards, and frameworks he had built over 5 years were now read-only. There was no emailed, no call, no explanation. That's when the truth settled in. Jordan hadn't just lost a job, that he had funded his own betrayal, that he had poured years of passion, energy, and belief into something he thought they were building together. But for Nathan, it had always been a solo act waiting to push him out. Still, Nathan had made a critical miscalculation. He thought Jordan would go quietly. But when you build something from the ground up, you know every line of code, every flaw in the system, every weak spot. And Jordan, he wasn't planning on disappearing. Nathan may have taken the stage, but the real reckoning was still coming. After being blindsided by betrayal, Jordan didn't lash out. He didn't call, confront, or demand answers. Instead, he sat alone in his apartment, staring at a blank email, and made a choice. He wasn't going to win by yelling. He was going to win by being exact. He opened a fresh document and named it Reconstruction. This wasn't revenge at IT, was a record, a quiet unraveling of the timeline. He began documenting every moment Nathan had undermined him, every decision made behind his back, every red flag he had once dismissed as just Nathan being Nathan. The memories came flooding in. A client Jordan had introduced had mysteriously begun working only with Nathan. Legal fees had been quietly adjusted in the books. The company's back end had been migrated to a new system without his knowledge. The deeper Jordan dug, the more he realized how far the erosion had gone. Nathan hadn't just taken over, he'd restructured the entire company beneath Jordan's nose. But Nathan had underestimated something. Jordan didn't just build Ghost Key with code. He built it with foresight. Years earlier, anticipating worst-case scenarios, Jordan had secretly constructed a mirrored environment of the company's infrastructure. IT included encrypted backups, dev tools, test servers, all privately hosted, fully secure and still accessible. Not for sabotage, but for protection. That backup still existed. Logging in, Jordan discovered the keys and credentials hadn't changed in minutes. He had full access to GhostKey's real engine, the proprietary tech Nathan now flaunted to investors as if it were his own creation. And worse, Nathan hadn't even tried to cover the theft. Lines of code were copied word for word. Fragments of his original libraries, his initials and comments, even the same bugs he'd once put off fixing, they were all there. GhostKey's new foundation had been built with the very code Jordan had handcrafted. He wasn't angry. He was insulted. They didn't think he would check. They assumed he wouldn't fight back. But the man they erased no longer existed. That version of Jordan had ended the moment his keycard failed at the office door. What remained was colder, sharper, focused. He began collecting data. He installed silent monitors. Within days he had detailed logs, IP addresses, session times, file histories, all showing Nathan and his new dev team struggling. They didn't understand what they were using. They could copy code, but they couldn't evolve it. They didn't grasp the logic behind the security protocols, the anomaly tracking features, the encrypted modules. Jordan was still the architect. Nathan, just a salesman with a stolen flashlight, trying to illuminate what he didn't comprehend. The hardest truth was realizing how deliberate the betrayal had been. Jordan recalled subtle signs he'd ignored, like a Thanksgiving dinner where his mom questioned whether he was tired of working so hard. And Nathan had joked about Jordan stepping back. What seemed like harmless teasing now looked like groundwork, foreshadowing. But one final discovery nearly broke him. On a shared drive, tucked inside Nathan's personal folder, not the company's, Jordan found investor pitch decks. Beautifully designed slides, packed with diagrams and systems he had created. But his name had been erased. Where once it had said Jordan Clay, co-founder and chief architect, it now read, lead technology developed under direct oversight by Nathan Clay. He stared at that line. Direct oversight. That's what he had become, a ghost under Nathan's narrative. A silent builder whose fingerprints had been wiped clean for someone else's story. Jordan didn't scream. He didn't write back. He didn't storm the office. He closed the folder. This wasn't going to end in drama. It would end in strategy, silence, and precision. Because the only reason Nathan thought he was winning was because Jordan hadn't moved yet. But when he did, no one would see it coming. Jordan didn't retaliate with rage. He responded with control. He knew from experience that anger is clumsy and self-destructive. But cold precision? That's power. So, instead of making noise, Jordan chose silence, and no dramatic posts, no confrontations. He wanted Nathan and his team to feel safe, because people only make real mistakes when they believe no one's watching. He was counting on that. Within days, Jordan discovered his first opening. Access to a forgotten admin panel linked to their old staging server. The team had neglected to decommission it, an oversight born of arrogance. It didn't hold much, but it did retain log monitoring. That meant Jordan could see every login, every failed request, and every access attempt from Nathan and his new developers. Nathan was consistent, logging in every morning at 8:43. But their new lead developer, Rob, was another story. Jordan watched as Rob continuously triggered system errors, misfiring API calls, broken queries, and failed attempts to replicate Jordan's encryption modules. It became clear. They weren't just using Jordan's original code, they were relying on it. And they didn't understand it. Jordan archived every failure, every IP log, and traced activity down to specific co-working spaces. He even deployed a harmless test script laced with a tracker. When it was downloaded, Jordan got geolocation data and usage patterns. Rob, who claimed he was rebuilding GhostKey's infrastructure from scratch, had been copying code line for line. He didn't understand the system was just blindly following someone else's blueprint. Jordan didn't expose him. Because this wasn't about Rob. This was about reclaiming what had been stolen. While they stumbled in the dark, Jordan laid a new foundation. He quietly formed two shell companies, one to legally own the intellectual property he had developed, and another to serve as a stealth tech incubator. He filed trademarks on key modules the current team was still using, attaching timestamped Git records as proof. It wasn't an attack. It was preparation. He was setting the legal battlefield before the first shot was fired. Jordan reached out to a friend from school, now an IP attorney. He didn't ask her to file a lawsuit. He simply asked what she would need if it came to that. Receipts, she said. Timeline, proof of licensing, clear violations, and documentation. Jordan already had them all. Next, he contacted Sarah, their original UX designer. Nathan had once dismissed her work as too subtle and replaced her with a louder agency. But Jordan remembered the early days when they stayed up late designing something meaningful, something ethical. When he called, her voice was wary, but when Jordan explained his vision, she agreed immediately. "Where do I sign?" she asked. And just like that, Jordan began to rebuild, not in anger, but in clarity. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was reclamation. Nathan might have had the infrastructure, but Jordan still had the soul. In just a week, Jordan assembled a small, tight-knit team. Quiet, focused, disciplined. They operated in encrypted environments, wrote clean, elegant code, and avoided all noise. They weren't chasing headlines or investors. They were building what Ghost Key should have been all along. A tool built on trust, not showmanship. Meanwhile, cracks started appearing in Nathan's empire. Investors grew nervous. One major investor from Chicago, someone Jordan had never met, reached out directly. He'd done his research. "Your name's still on the patents," the investor said. "Why aren't you at the table?" Jordan told the truth, calm, simple, and without spin. The investor listened, then replied, "Send me the files." That was the beginning of the end for Nathan. A financial audit was triggered. One of Ghost Key's early angel investors froze funding, citing concerns over internal ownership structure. In corporate speak, they smelled something rotten. And the most satisfying part? Nathan had no idea how it was happening. He didn't know where the breach was. He didn't know who was behind the legal flags or investor hesitations. He didn't know Jordan was orchestrating it all, because Jordan had made no sound. He had simply moved the pieces silently, strategically. Let Nathan blame luck. Let him fear ghosts. After all, Ghost Key was the name he stole. And now, that name had come back to haunt him. You can't erase someone and expect them to stay gone forever. Eventually, they write themselves back into the story. That's exactly what Jordan did. Nathan's downfall began not in court or code, but in optics. Public perception, the currency of modern startups, began to shift. Nathan mistook Jordan's silence for retreat. He assumed Jordan was broken, off sulking or ranting into the void. But Jordan wasn't mourning, he was measuring. Every day Nathan operated with stolen tools. He stepped deeper into a trap Jordan had stopped building the moment they cut him out. The first formal strike came quietly, an email from Ghost Key's general counsel asking for clarification on ownership of their security infrastructure. Jordan didn't reply personally. His lawyer, representing one of Jordan's shell companies, the one holding the original pre-LLC source code, responded instead with a single line. "Please advise your client that further inquiry should be directed to the current license holder." It was a move, not an attack. A warning shot dressed in legal civility. From that moment forward, everything Nathan did had an invisible mirror. Product updates. Jordan's legal team flagged reused assets. Rebrands? They identified overlaps in code and branding. And through it all, Jordan said nothing publicly. He waited for Nathan to be forced into the light. That moment came at a cybersecurity panel downtown. A neutral, public venue, moderated by one of their early investors. She invited both founders without telling either that the other would be there. Jordan RSVP'd. When Nathan saw him, the shock was instant. Jordan didn't confront him, he simply sat nearby. The panel began, covering ethics, data compliance, and AI regulation. Then came the final question, a softball about Ghost Key's proprietary systems. Nathan smiled and launched into his investor-friendly speech. "Everything has been rebuilt internally. We maintain full compliance documentation." He locked eyes with Jordan. So Jordan took the mic and calmly asked a follow-up. "Could you clarify whether that includes components derived from the pre-2019 Xylem module set, which, based on Git logs, originated from an entity outside current Ghost Key ownership?" The room froze. Nathan fumbled, muttered something about confused timelines. But the damage was done. Everyone in the room, founders, engineers, lawyers, understood what Git logs meant. No one asks that unless they have proof. Jordan said nothing more. He stood, smiled, and walked out. The war was no longer silent. Nathan panicked. 3 days later, Jordan received a cease and desist letter. It was sloppy, filled with vague accusations and legal posturing. It wasn't strong, it was scared. Because people with the truth don't threaten silence, they show evidence. Jordan responded through his lawyer with timestamps, licensing chains, formation records, and email sand CC'd 3 regulatory bodies. Then he posted a single line to Twitter. "Ownership is a matter of record. That's all I'll say. No tags. No names." But it was enough. Tech Twitter took over. Screenshots surfaced. Archived Git logs. Old interviews. People put the puzzle together, and the questions started rolling in. Nathan spiraled. He publicly fired a junior dev, then another. Then locked down the Ghost Key Git repository entirely. Internal leaks began to surface. One employee anonymously claimed they hadn't been paid in weeks. Investors started pulling back. The house Nathan built on silence began to crumble publicly. And Jordan? He stayed focused. His new platform was quietly in beta, built by a team that had grown from 3 to 12, every single one of them ex-Ghost Key, loyal, capable, and quietly working towards something real. No noise. But people found them, because while Nathan was screaming for control, Jordan had already taken it back with quiet precision. And that's the truth about power. It doesn't belong to the loudest one in the room. It belongs to the one who can move the room without saying a word. At 4:47 a.m., Jordan received an email, not from a lawyer, not from an investor, but from a junior engineer at Ghost Key. Someone he'd once trained, someone Nathan had dismissed as too timid. But quiet people often see the most. And what this engineer sent wasn't just a message, it was evidence. Contained in the email were server logs, Slack screenshots, doctored timestamps, fake user accounts simulating license approvals, and source code still stamped with Jordan's digital signature. The most damning file? A spreadsheet labeled contingencies, listing Jordan's name 17 times, highlighted in red at a hit list. Jordan didn't respond. He simply read through it all, stood up, took a breath, and walked outside into the morning. Not to vent, not to rage. He was done with anger. What he felt now was clarity. Because he hadn't brought the house down, Ghost Key was collapsing under the weight of its own lies. By noon that same day, another email arrived, this time from a government regulatory liaison. Ghost Key was under formal investigation following an anonymous complaint. Allegations included intellectual property misuse, securities disclosure failure, and improper licensing of legacy code. It was dry legal language, but Jordan understood exactly what it meant. They were in real trouble, and he hadn't lifted a finger. Jordan didn't want revenge anymore. He had mentally and professionally moved on. But he also wasn't going to stop the avalanche already in motion. He sent a brief summary to his attorney, who warned, if this goes federal, they'll want to hear your side. He was ready. Every commit log, every Slack thread, every source file tied to his name had been archived since the moment Nathan shut him out. Not out of spite, but because when you've had everything stolen once, you learn never to walk blindly again. Later that week, a tech journalist posted a cryptic tweet. Ghost Key, Silicon Valley's golden child, may be facing a storm over licensing ethics. That single post caused more chaos than any lawsuit could. Perception, not evidence, drives early-stage venture capital. And once the illusion cracks, investors disappear fast. Within 24 hours, 2 major investors pulled out. The press came knocking. Ghost Key scrambled to manage the narrative. Nathan issued a stiff public statement filled with legal buzzwords like transparency and compliance. But the trust was gone. Then came the unexpected call, not from the press, not from Ghost Key, but from one of the investment firms that had once ignored Jordan's pitches. Now they were interested. Genuinely. They'd seen how he handled the chaos. No Twitter rants, no smear campaigns, just quiet integrity and clean strategy. We've followed your trajectory, they said. You didn't throw stones, but everyone knows who laid the foundation. They offered $6.2 million in pre-seed funding. Jordan didn't jump at it. He asked hard questions. He made their ethics team meet his developers. He wasn't just building tech anymore, he was building culture, trust, a new standard. And then, one final twist. Nathan called. The voice Jordan hadn't heard since being locked out of the company and his family home. Nathan didn't apologize, didn't argue. Just said, they're all pulling out. Even the ones I thought were on my side. Then, is that what you wanted? Jordan said nothing at first. Because it wasn't about winning. It was about reclaiming peace. And what he had now was power, not the loud, blustering kind Nathan always sought, but the quiet, steady kind that builds empires from the ground up. Nathan asked if they could talk. Maybe rebuild something together. Jordan waited 10 seconds in silence. Then answered, we already did. You just weren't invited. Click. He didn't need revenge. He had justice. And momentum. The world now saw what Nathan truly was. More importantly, they finally saw what Jordan had always been. Not a shadow. Not an afterthought. The architect. The foundation. And now, the future. By the time Nathan realized the walls were collapsing, it was too late to save them. Ghost Key wasn't falling because someone tore it down, it was imploding from within. Nathan had built a fortress from borrowed code and false stories, and the foundation he lied into existence was finally crumbling. It all began with a whisper, a single tweet from a respected tech analyst. Ghost Key reportedly losing major partnerships amid quiet compliance panic. That word panic spread faster than any lawsuit. Investors who once flaunted their Ghost Key ties went silent. LinkedIn profiles were quietly edited. Urgent emails turned into vague PR scripts. Nathan was losing influence faster than he could pivot, and he had no idea how to stop it. So he did what insecure leaders do, he got louder. Nathan hosted a live stream, and Jordan watched from his apartment. Nathan looked worn down. His collar was crooked, his voice cracked, and his words felt desperate. "I've always been transparent," he said. "This is sabotage from bad faith actors." He didn't name Jordan. But everyone watching knew. The comments exploded with speculation. Is he talking about the co-founder? Didn't he steal the code? This feels like Theranos 2.0. Then someone dropped a screenshot of an early Ghost Key prototype with Jordan's username still visible in the commit log. The timestamp? 6 months before Ghost Key was even incorporated. Jordan hadn't leaked it. He didn't need to. Someone from the old team had access and finally decided enough was enough. That was the breaking point. Soon after, another whistleblower came forward, this time publicly. A former engineer submitted a sworn affidavit to the Office of Technological Ethics, confirming that at least 37% of Ghost Key's current security infrastructure came from pre-LLC code written by Jordan. He backed it with files, logs, and full source chains. Ghost Key's silence didn't just shatter, it detonated. Leaked Slack messages revealed executives scrambling to delete logs, rewrite code, and fake documentation. One engineer refused and was immediately locked out. Then, the real collapse began. 3 senior engineers resigned in unison. Their parting messages were brief but devastating. One wrote, "When leadership breaks more than it builds, it's time to stop watching." The company's public image cratered. App ratings plunged, partnerships dissolved. Media outlets shifted tone from praising Ghost Key as the future of data integrity to reporting it as a cautionary tale in corporate ego. Nathan went from visionary to liability overnight. Desperate to reclaim control, Nathan scheduled a live-streamed emergency summit. He promised answers. Instead, he delivered a meltdown. Broadcasting from a glassy, soulless boardroom, he tried to frame the chaos as a misunderstanding. His hands shook. His voice broke. He accused people of betrayal, of sabotage, of turning on him. At one point, he stared into the camera and asked, "You think I'm the villain?" No one answered, but the silence spoke volumes. 20 minutes in, the live stream cut out. Rumor has it a board member pulled the plug. That was the end. Ghost Key's website vanished the next morning. Their social media accounts were wiped. Job listings disappeared. Employees quietly updated their bios to "formerly at Ghost Key." Nathan, once Silicon Valley's privacy golden boy, had become a digital outcast. Jordan received an email from one of the earliest investors they had ever pitched, someone who had turned them down years ago. It read, "Looks like you were always the real one. Respect." Jordan didn't reply. There was nothing left to prove. No need for celebration or revenge. This wasn't about vindication. It was about closure. The company Nathan stole, the house he locked Jordan out of, had burned down. Not because Jordan lit the match, but because Nathan left the gas running too long. And when it finally exploded, he was still inside. When Ghost Key finally collapsed and Nathan was escorted out of the company he once ruled, Jordan didn't feel victorious. No celebration. No triumph, just quiet. The kind that follows a storm when everything has settled and there's nothing left to fight. The temptation to gloat was there. Jordan had the receipts, the documentation, the timeline. He could have gone viral exposing every betrayal. But he didn't, because in the end, the truth had spoken for itself. His name had been cleared. The industry now saw what had really happened. He didn't need to explain anymore. That night, Jordan stood in his apartment, surrounded by old sketches and scribbled whiteboard notes from years past, reminders of who he was before it all got messy. And that's when it hit him. He no longer wanted revenge, he just wanted his life back. His peace. The freedom to create again, not in reaction to harm, but from a place of purpose. He deleted a final draft of a tell-all article, a brutal, fact-filled account that would have blown up online. But he didn't need it, that he already had what Nathan never truly understood. Quiet, earned respect. Messages came in. An old professor left a voicemail praising his patience and long view. Jamal, their first designer, reached out with a voice note full of regret and renewed loyalty. It reminded Jordan that even when he felt alone, people had believed in him. Some had just been waiting for him to return to himself. Nathan, meanwhile, vanished from the tech world. His LinkedIn went dark, his podcast disappeared, and his speaking tour was canceled. Rumors floated, moved in with family, was writing a memoir, or trying to rebrand as a coach for failed founders. Jordan didn't care. Nathan's downfall wasn't his destination, just a bridge he'd crossed. What mattered now was clarity. Jordan started clearing his apartment, not to erase the past, but to make space for what came next. He boxed up Ghost Key artifacts, He reopened old notebooks, rediscovering ideas once set aside for the sake of scale and startup optics. One idea stood out. A simple, beautiful password manager designed for seniors. Something he once imagined while caring for his father, something Ghost Key had dismissed. Now it felt like the right place to begin again. No deadlines, no investors, no hype. Just healing. Jordan declined interviews and investment offers that he wasn't building to impress anyone, he was building to remember who he was. Each morning, he brewed coffee, opened the windows, and returned to the whiteboard not as a survivor of betrayal, but as a creator. That's the thing most people misunderstand about revenge. The best kind isn't loud. It doesn't trend. It endures. Because real justice isn't about watching your enemy fall. It's about rising so completely that they no longer matter. And Jordan? He wasn't standing in Nathan's shadow anymore. He stood in the calm light of a new beginning in ground he'd poured himself. One choice, one sketch, one quiet step at a time. It didn't begin with headlines or a relaunch. It began with silence. Jordan sat at a simple desk, alone, fingers resting on a keyboard without pressure or expectation. This new beginning was nothing like Ghost Key. There were no deadlines, no demands, no Nathan hovering over his shoulder. Just space, just calm. And for the first time in a long while, just Jordan. He named the project Pillar. A name meant to represent what the tool was intended to be. Strong, steady, foundational. Not flashy. Not built for hype. Built to endure. Unlike Ghost Key, Pillar wasn't built to impress venture capitalists or chase media attention. It was for the overlooked, the aging, the underserved, the ones ignored by modern tech. Jordan thought of his father, who would have appreciated a tool like this. So he built Pillar for him as a quiet tribute. For the first 3 months, he worked alone. He coded, designed, rewrote, and took walks. He cooked. He listened to music again, not for background noise, but for beauty. Slowly, life became his again. Then the team began to form organically. Jamal messaged, asking if his seat was still open. He joined. Then Lynn, a friend from design school. Then Paul, who had once disappeared during the Ghost Key fallout, returned this time with a privacy-first toolkit he'd been quietly developing. They didn't talk about scaling. They weren't founders anymore. They were builders, simple, grounded, united. 6 months later, Pillar launched QuietLito, a small group of beta testers. Seniors, caregivers, veterans. The feedback wasn't buzzworthy, but it was human. One user wrote, "This is the first app I've used in 5 years that didn't make me feel stupid." Jordan printed that message and taped it to his wall. The money came later, but carefully. Jordan vetted investors with intention. One woman formerly of a Big Four firm offered support through a fund aimed at building tools for the underserved. She understood the mission. She never asked about Ghost Key. She didn't need to. Nathan's name never came up again, not in meetings, not in interviews, not even in whispers at tech conferences. Ghost Key had become a cautionary tale. Nathan had become a ghost. Jordan didn't know where Nathan was now, and he didn't care. Whether Nathan wrote a memoir, gave talks, or disappeared, it no longer mattered. That story was over. That connection, cut. Forgiveness? Maybe. Or maybe just release. There was no more anger, no desire to prove anything. Jordan slept well now, not because he had won, but because he had healed. He had reclaimed the version of himself from before the betrayal, before ambition twisted his purpose. He made peace with the past. And from that peace, he built something new. Pillar is still small, still quiet but real. And for the people who use it without confusion, without fear, without compromise, matters. That's the new story. Not revenge. Not spectacle. But meaning. And when people ask Jordan if it was worth it, he tells them the truth. It was never about getting even. It was always about getting free.